You want some bad news, Michael?
No.
What are you asking me?
You're the guru of the gray matter. I figured if anybody had it, you'd have the answer.
I can't give you any direction.
I think I'm going to have to change this channel. I'm sorry.
You're completely wrong.
I refuse to be wrong on 2 calls in a row.
Tell me I'm spot on or tell me I'm crazy as all get out.
I have no idea.
I have a 6-month-old, so we'll be raising him according to Dr. Ray.
Talk about being a winner.
So, you want my question?
You ain't making any sense.
You're absolutely right. I just needed confirmation.
So what are you going to do about it, Dawn?
I'm calling you.
Now, from the studios of Living Bread Radio Network in Canton, Ohio, the hometown of Mother Angelica, here's Dr. Ray.
Calling me might be a first step, but the real work, that's like having a blueprint for a house. The real work is building the house. That's what it is about therapy. You can talk for years. And I've seen people be in therapy for years and years and years and years, which raises the question, what are you doing? Is it just kind of time to just talk about all that bothers you, all you're struggling with, or are you going to take it outside the office and into the real world and make the changes? I've not had just only if I have not had only a few, I'm trying to get the grammar correct on this sentence, people who have been in therapy for years, not with me, but with others. Long, long, long time. And the question becomes, okay, are you making the changes that you thought therapy was going to trigger? Oh, another one of those words you're not allowed to use. This is Dr. Ray. This is Friday on The Doctor Is In, and as such, approximately 94% of the time, it is Look Back Friday. The other 6% of the time, we go to taking calls because there are folks, as the call volume has proven on Fridays, there are folks who can only call on Fridays, and so they do call in on Fridays. Maybe they work a 4-day week or something about their work schedule, or maybe a homeschooling mom doesn't work all day with the kids on Friday. She gets done at noon, whatever it might be. So Look Back Friday is suspended about 1/16 of the time. That's 6% roughly. Was that 6.25%, I think? But today is a standard Look Back Friday, so we will take previous calls from shows going back sometimes as far as 2, 3, 4 months, and they trigger more than there's that word again. They spur more than maybe another call, some aspect that can take its own time. I can speak about it and embellish it a little more than I would have had time to the first time around. So we got the calls up there, and they vary. They vary wildly. I got a 4-year-old, got an estranged adult, we got a 21-year-old with motivation problems, 7-year-old grandson resisting, whether it's anxiety or behavior, we'll find out. So all of that, we'll get to that. Tonight, I'm going to play trivia. I love to play trivia. Although, I got to admit, I'm so much better at stuff that was in the 70s. The programs I used to watch. Now, you get past 2000 and what a lot of these young trivia question designers have is of course, very, very much recent pop culture. And that's where I just deer in the headlight, I just stare. But when we get into things like maybe chemistry or government or human anatomy, we've even had psychology, which I've blown, by the way, and I got mocked badly. One of the topics was psychology. So my teammates are saying, okay, we got Ray here. Yeah, I missed it. In my defense, it was Maslow's personality theory, which is an old personality theory, and nobody really follows it anymore, but you had to decide what the middle steps were towards self-actualization, a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, as he put it. And I knew the upper ones and I knew the lower ones, but those middle ones, come on, I had that way back in college. All right, so I missed that. And every once in a while, we get a religious question, believe it or not. Just recently, the question was, this particular individual became Pope, and his name was Karol Wojtyła. Well, I knew that, but I was amazed at how many of the other teams didn't. Okay, all that said, leading up to this, as I was just drifting left and right, getting to my point. We usually order something to eat, my wife and I, and we say our blessings before we eat. We make the sign of the cross. And my godson is there, and his mother's there. She's on our team, and she makes the sign of the cross too. And I realized that making the sign of the cross in a restaurant to say your blessing is dangerous for a number of reasons. One, now you really can't be a jerk. If the server messes up your meal, maybe twice, you can't say, no, that's not what I ordered. You can't do that. I mean, she or he might have seen you making the sign of the cross. All right, so that's the first thing. You can't be rude or abrupt. You have to be enormously pleasant all the way to the end, because they might have seen you praying. That's one. Secondly, making the sign of the cross can cost you. You don't want to leave a $2 tip on a $28 meal. You don't. You really don't even want to leave 10%, because that's $2.80. Talk about cheap. So on one hand, they'll see you making the sign of the cross, which they don't see pretty much anybody doing in there. You got to keep in mind that at that evening, you're probably the only one in the whole place who's making a sign of the cross, and you're probably one of the few people they've ever seen make the sign of the cross in a restaurant and say your blessing. So now you got to give at least 20%. That's expensive. But 20% ain't that big a deal with a $28 meal. It's $5.60. All right. If at all possible, you don't even go by percentage. You just give a nice tip, maybe $10. Dr. Ray, what are you doing? Well, come on. You want the person to realize if you're going to make a statement that I'm different in my religious practice here out in public than most other folk, then you're probably going to leave a tip that's disproportionate to most other folk. Don't you think? Now, you could not say your blessing, or you could do like you do when I was in the evangelical world. You just quietly, slowly bow your head, say a real quick blessing, and nobody really knows if you're looking at your lap or you're saying blessings. You can get away with it that way. But if you're going to make the sign of the cross, especially a big one, not one of these little 2-inchers on your chest right there in your chest bone, you may kind of make a sign of the cross, and your hand barely moves, and people could think you're scratching yourself. No, make a big one up to your head, chest, shoulder. Oh, boy. No mistake in that one. Well, then you got to be a different sort of customer. Dave Barry says this, and I think this is fascinating. Dave Barry is an insightful columnist, and I'm kind of sad that he quit writing columns, but he was brilliant in his insights, and he was funny as all get out. He said this: always watch how someone treats the restaurant server. Someone who is rude or mean or abrupt, scolding to a restaurant server is generally not a nice person. It's true. The view is, I'm above you. You work for me, at least right now. So, sign of the cross, that means you got to be really sweet. Got to be nice. Got to be pleasant. Got to use good manners. Got to say thank you. They put the food in front of you. You don't just kind of pick up your fork and start eating it. You look at them and you say thank you. And when you order, you say, may I please have, okay? And when you tip, your tip is the kind of tip where they can't wait to wait on you next time you come in. I'm Dr. Ray. We'll get to those calls right after I take my many mandated Living Right with Dr. Ray breaks.
Brought to you by the nonprofit Seton Home Study.
Hi, everybody. Dr. Ray Garendi here. You want to pass the Catholic faith on to your children? A very good way is to teach your children at home. You want to protect your kids from the toxic culture that surrounds us? Do you want to have a greater influence than what your kids are learning? Once more, a great way is to teach your children at home. No teacher is going to care about your kids as much as you do. Seton Home Study School is the best way to teach your children at home. Go to setonhome.org. setonhome.org.
This program is brought to you by the following nonprofit underwriter.
Are you longing to hear God's voice? Lord, Teach Me to Pray, the free Ignatian prayer series will open your heart to His voice, to the peace you are seeking, and the only love that fulfills the human heart, Jesus. God is calling you to true joy, knowing Jesus personally. Lord, Teach Me to Pray is free. Go to LordTeachMeToPray.com, click on the red box, order the Lord, Teach Me to Pray series now. Go to LordTeachMeToPray.com.
Light of the East, weekends on Ave Maria Radio.
I'm Father Thomas Loya. This week on Ave Maria, the SSPX versus the Pope, Novus Ordo versus traditional Latin Mass. The Western lung of the Church has gone bipolar on itself, and maybe the Eastern lung of the Church can help.
Now on Ave Maria Radio's newest FM stations, 105.5 FM in Southfield and 107.9 FM in Ann Arbor.
Hi, this is Vanessa Denha-Garmo. Sylvan Learning offers personalized one-on-one academic coaching online from home, designed around your child's unique needs and schedule. Strong academic skills today can help create opportunities tomorrow. Higher grades and stronger test scores can open the door to scholarships, top universities, and a brighter future. Visit mysylvancoach.com to learn more about one-on-one coaching online from home. That's mysylvancoach.com.
Thank you for joining me. It's Dr. Ray Guarendi. Program Doctor is In, Monday through Friday. Co-production of the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network and Ave Maria Radio Communications. Right now in the Ave Maria studios is my producer man and editor of these Look Back Calls, Andrew Kruchek. Okay, let's take... now we get this question a lot. And so I'm wondering why I put it up there, because I think it probably brings out an angle that I wanted to pursue during the question that I didn't pursue. So let's find out. Patricia is calling in with something that's very, very, very common, sadly, tragically common. She's estranged. It says you're from her adult children. I'm assuming all of them, which was a little less common. You don't typically get all of them writing you off, but let's find out what's going on.
I happen to be a licensed mental health therapist with over 20 years experience. And I also happen to have had the fortunate life experience of being raised Catholic. I also have experienced my adult children becoming estranged. That has been mostly resolved with a lot of compassion and boundaries on the part of the parent. So it works both ways. My concern is, when we talk about secular, some of these folks really need. I've worked with many, many, many estranged young adults. Okay, and you're absolutely right. They're thinking of themselves, and that is the focus. But if you spend a little time in therapy, you might be able to get to a place where both parent and children can be in the same room and problem solve.
If assuming here, Patricia, that the therapist is of the inclination to do that, rather than just simply swallowing whole what the client says and says, wow, that sounds terrible. Your parents are just awful people.
Right. And there is that. And honestly, there are some really horrific parenting things, children that, took LSD at age 5.
Yes.
That happens.
But those are not the ones that we're talking about. You're absolutely correct. Those do need a safe distance. But what we're seeing, what you're probably seeing a lot of, is people who you look at their parents and say, yeah, okay, they had their flaws, but they don't deserve to be written out of their life. That's the phenomenon that's new.
Yeah. And it's, there's a whole lot of anger out there, and there's a whole lot of spiritual support. And things are really mixed up when it comes to which direction to go in this world regarding, the name of doing some pretty awful things.
When I have someone in my office, and it's not unusual, I had one yesterday where the spouse says, you are not to be around your parents anymore. I've had a lot of those. Have you had those?
Yes.
Where the son or daughter goes along with the spouse because they would have to live in a miserable situation if they didn't. And so
would you say that's part of an abusive relationship?
The marriage?
Yes.
Oh yeah, it's ugly. Oh yeah. But what happens is, of course, is they feel forced to choose. Okay, so I'm going to live with my spouse and have to separate from my parents. Now, the other thing that you probably see this too is that over time, what may have been a shaky relationship between parent and child now becomes very bad because the child has lived with a spouse who continues to say, your parents are this, your parents are that, I don't like your parents do this to me, your parents are evil, your parents are awful, your parents are religious fanatics, whatever it is. And then you can't hear that every day and not be influenced.
Mm-hmm. That's true. But again, there's where the ability to, or the emotional strength to say, that's not kind to talk about anyone that way. If it's really about healing those relationships.
Yeah, you hope that in fact they're open to that.
That's what Jesus taught us. Kindness.
You're right, Patricia. You hope that the clients are open to that. And many of the parents
you need to get them there secularly and spiritually.
I know it. You're absolutely correct about that. I always tell people this. Somebody will ask me, do you ever not know completely what to suggest to somebody? And I say, no, I've been doing this long enough that I usually can come up with some kind of idea or notion. I said, that's not the hard part of therapy. The hard part is what you just said, Patricia, which is convincing them to do it.
And it takes patience sometimes. And sometimes it takes being very direct, as in therapy is work. It's a lot of work. And it really is working on yourself. That's where I guess maybe, I felt the motivation to call in, because therapy is working on what you can do. You don't really have control over what other people do. So, if you want a relationship with your parents or you want a relationship with your spouse, it might be, I'm not going to tolerate you talking unkind about our children, my friends, or my family. You can point out things that might need to change, but it's not okay to be cruel or it's really hard navigating all this. It was in my early years of marriage, and I still struggle with it. I have a 99-year-old father-in-law that has some pretty interesting ideas.
My most recent book is How to Get Along with Almost Everybody, and I insisted that the almost be in the title because, as you say, it's going to take some openness and cooperation. Because even when someone says, I told my mom, I can't allow you to talk that way about my children or about me, and that if that worked or if that was successful, that'd be great. The frustration I deal with a lot of my clients is they'll say, my mother still talks that way, and now I'm not sure what to do about it because I don't want to write her out of my life, but she can be pretty obnoxious. I would have been so curious. Patricia just kind of touched upon it. And by the way, her call was kind of related to my thoughts that I did on an earlier monologue, which is the idea that this kind of estrangement that is so epidemic in our culture is not so in other cultures. One therapist from an African country said in her country, her home country, this kind of estrangement is literally, they'll need that word, is unheard of. Absolutely unheard of. You didn't do this. There was much, much tighter family bonds, And there was not this intolerance that you think the way I do or you look at things the way I do, so therefore I don't really want you in my life. So it's really not the norm. It's kind of an American norm, and maybe you could stretch it to say it's a sort of a Western society norm. But that said, I would be so curious. She said she went through a period of estrangement with her adult children. How many children? 1, 2, 3. Well, 2 or 3 or more. Probably 2. Okay, so she went through a period of that. And I would wonder how and why. And she reconciled. Now, my experience has been, at least in the calls and the sample size I get, is that more often, if you look at this from a religious parent perspective, it is the younger people wanting to sever from the older people. The older folks are fairly religious, practicing their faith. It means something to them. By and large, maybe they're still irritating or annoying or opinionated, whatever it might be, difficult. But there is an intolerance on many of the younger people's part, which is, I just don't want to deal with you. And they feel no moral obligation to do so. If they've abandoned the faith, if they pretty much say, well, there's a certain point where I'm allowed to write my parents off or my mother off because she's this way. Now, as Patricia pointed out, yes, there are situations that are actually pointing rather adamantly towards separation. Yes, that could be a dangerous parent, could be just a relentlessly uncooperative parent, a parent who undercuts the young adult's parenting. Yeah, there are circumstances, but those are not the norm in the ones that we see in kind of a religious world. The ones that we see more often separate because of political views, because of COVID, because of the vaccine. Oh, I remember that with the vaccine. Many of the parents did not want to take the vaccine, and the kids said, you can't come here. You're not allowed to come here if you don't get the vaccine. And so that just drove a wedge between a lot of families. And ironically, the vaccine didn't prove itself to make one immune to COVID. So all that said, one of the things I see is a burgeoning intolerance for the way you think, mom, dad, the way you look at things. I'm intolerant of it. More often coming from the in-laws, because, of course, there is a connection, a biological connection, a historical connection between a son or daughter and his or her parents, but the in-law does not have that connection. And unfortunately, a percentage of the time, the parents have miscalculated. They've said things they shouldn't have said. They gave opinions that weren't asked for. They gave guidance and advice. They didn't know when to back off. And they didn't realize that the grown children, especially the in-law grown children, had much less of an ability to accept all this. And then they found themselves being estranged or kept from the grandkids. That's oftentimes a dynamic. I would have been fascinated to find out exactly what Patricia did to get the reconciliation going. My guess would be there was probably a lot of apologies, at least on her part, toward the kids regarding whatever it was that they thought she did that pushed them away. Even though one could probably make the case that she didn't do anything wrong, but she was apologizing for their perception of her wrong, I guess. Thank you for joining me here on The Doctor Is In. I'm Dr. Ray Guarendi. Program comes to you Monday through Friday, 1 o'clock Eastern Time. Co-production, EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network, some 500-plus stations, as well as Ave Maria Radio Communications, where it is produced in Ann Arbor through the capable hands of my producer man, Andrew Kruchek, who also is the editor of these Look Back calls. This is Look Back Friday. This is where I take a look at earlier calls, listen to them. And poor Andrew, he has to hear me 3 times. Okay, so that said, let's see where we're going here. Let's go to Vicky. She's 21 years old. Struggles with self-motivation. Now, when you say you got to get yourself motivated, I'm going to assume it's motivated to do certain things. You may not be motivated to take a nap. I mean, you may not be hard to motivate to take a nap or to eat an ice cream cone, but I'm going to assume it's things you look at and say, I should be doing that.
Yeah, the biggest one is probably work, and then household tasks are another, which I guess is rare. No one really wants to work or do chores, but it's also grown to my hobbies as well. I'll get myself like hyped up to do them. Like I'll tell myself, okay, I'm going to work hard today. I'm going to do all this. I'm going to fold laundry and all that. Or if I have a day off, I'm like, okay, I'll do some scrapbooking or paint or whatever. But then when it comes down to doing it, I just don't want to do it anymore. And all the excitement and motivation just disappears. And instead, I just want to go to bed and lay there.
Is that what you do instead? You just do nothing else instead? You just go lay down?
Sometimes, but other times I just try to push myself and do it. And I am able to get through the task, but I feel like I'm doing it half-heartedly. And I'm just dragging my way through it.
You wouldn't consider yourself depressed, would you?
I recently developed a medical condition, and I take medication for it. And part of that medication side effects is depression and lack of focus and fatigue. And the goal, I'm doing treatment right now to get rid of the medical condition. The goal is to stop taking this medication within the next year. I've kind of struggled with the whole motivation my whole life, but after I started taking medication, it's gotten worse. Even sometimes whenever I want to go and lay in bed and do nothing, I also want to cry for some reason. I don't know why.
Your doctor know this?
No.
Well, you better tell him or her. There was one medication that I was on just recently after I had my heart surgery, and I went to the doc. I said, no way am I taking this stuff. It just slugged me out. And I said, nope, not happening. Give me something else, or I will deal with this in another way because it's not a medication I wanted to mess with. And he agreed. He said, yeah, it can be an ugly medicine. I said, good, because I'm an ugly guy, so get it out of me. So, Vicky, what I was going to tell you was possibly qualified now by the fact that this could be a physiological thing that's feeding into your lack of motivation. So the first thing I got to suggest, now you got to go talk to the doc. You got to say, hey, look, this stuff makes me want to sleep and I cry a lot. So that's the first thing. Now, we don't know totally how much of that's the meds and how much of it is you're just frustrated with yourself because you're saying, I just can't do the responsible things. What the heck's wrong with me? That could be right. Mm-hmm. Okay. Let me give you a couple of suggestions. And you said it at the very beginning. You solved your own problem and you didn't realize it when you said it. You said, I don't feel like doing it. Vicky, if you only did things that you felt like doing at the moment, a whole bunch of stuff would never get done. You can't wait till you feel like doing it. You tell yourself, I don't want to do this, but I know I need to do it, and I'll feel better when it's done. You debate with yourself, Vicky, if you say, I don't want to fold laundry. Oh, no. I know I should be getting that letter out, that thank you letter, but it just kind of hangs there. Don't debate. You debate, Vicky, and you'll lose. That's the first thing. That's the biggest thing with motivation. You got to get over your inertia. I hate to write. The hardest thing I do is write. That's even harder than weightlifting. But I know that if I sit down and try to put some thoughts to paper, once I get past that first 10 or 15 minutes, I'm more likely to get something done. If I say to myself, I don't feel like writing, I don't want to write, I wouldn't. I just wouldn't. So that's the first thing there. You got to know that, in fact, you do it because it is good for you and you'll feel a sense of accomplishment after you're done. My wife and I look at generally physical fitness, instructions, gurus, research, and they all have different ideas about how to get the most benefit out of weightlifting or out of cardio exercise, what kinds of exercises work, what kinds of things to focus on. Just recently listened to one where a guy was talking about weightlifting, and he said throughout his brief tutoring, he said, show up. And then he'd say something, he'd go, show up. And he'd give another idea, and he'd say, show up. I've talked about this before in this program. I've been lifting weights for decades. And my brother and I lift together. I used to feel like I was lifting on the moon. You know, the moon has 1/7 our gravity. Now I feel like I'm lifting on Jupiter. But either way. And I used to feel like I can't wait to go in because I'm going to make gains. And because I'm going to have a lot of strength and it's going to make me feel really, really good. Well, there's less and less of those days now. More or less, I'm doing it because it's good for me. I don't say, I can't wait to go push against gravity. So how do I keep going? We'll get that question asked of us. I'm going to run out of time. Shoot, I'll get to it. Get that question asked of us by people who just start lifting, particularly women. They'll just start. And we'll get to talking a little bit and say, how do you do it? How do you motivate yourself to do this? And I said, well, you just show up. Whether you feel like it or whether you don't, you just come in. And as you move through it, that motivation grows because you're there. I want to comment more on this after the break on dealing with motivation and getting over that initial inertia that affects so many of us in doing a chore, doing something that we've been putting off, etc. So I will talk about this on the other side of my many, many mandated breaks. Dr. Ray Guarendi, program Doctor is in. This is Look Back Friday. Prior to the break, I was talking to 21-year-old Vicky, who was talking about her problems motivating herself to do chores or to take on projects, and it was hard for her. And she talked about recently going on a medication for a medical condition, so this definitely complicates the picture because she said the medication makes her tired, and she also is weepy. So all that laying aside, and I advised her to speak to her doctor about all this. This person needs to know. Now, you may not have heard the details of Vicky's talk prior to the break because you weren't here, you weren't listening, and you know who you are. And don't blame me if you have psychological gaps in your makeup. So I'm doing my best to patch it up where you missed it. Now I'd like to go on. Vicky said, well, I push myself through it. And she talked about having the feeling or the excitement to want to do something, and then that wears off. And as soon as that wears off, then she finds out, I don't want to do it. And I talked about my experience with weightlifting over these many decades. As I get older, it gets harder and harder to go in there. But the word we tell newly weightlifting people, newbies, is just show up. You can't stay at home saying, I don't feel like going today. I'll go tomorrow. Maybe I'll be more like it tomorrow. No. If you debate, you'll lose, as I said before the break. You just move. Now, the law of inertia, I think that is Newton's first law. Somebody will correct me on this. Is first law of physics or second? A body at motion or at rest tends to stay in motion or at rest unless acted upon by an outside force. Okay, so something that escapes Earth's gravity heading out into the further reaches of our atmosphere, breaking free of our gravitational pull, really has not much out there to cause friction to slow it down or gravity to affect its movement. It just keeps going. A body at rest tends to stay at rest unless acted upon by an outside force. Inertia is the main problem in taking on any project that is either unpleasant, dreaded. Before coming to the show today, we have a number of shrubs in our house, and I usually trim those myself. The smaller ones are pretty easy to trim. You wrap a couple sheets around there, collect all the clippings, drag them off. Usually takes a while because I think there's 17 or 18 shrubs. Well, there was one left, kind of this one big yellow evergreen shrub. And it's been sitting there for a couple days, and I've just found other things to do that. I was occupied until noon with something else, and I had to be here by 1. Now, I had a half an hour. And I thought to myself, I don't really want to go out there, lay down the sheets and trim that shrub and bend over and then pick up all the clippings and take them to the trash and then put the clippers away and wrap up the extension cord and all that. I mean, I've only got a half an hour. Now, that was my thinking. If I would have listened to my thinking, I would not have clipped that shrub. Instead, I said to myself, go clip the shrub. So I walked out the door. No more debate. I wasn't thinking about how I don't want to do this. I walked out the door. I grabbed the clippers. I grabbed the sheets. I went around front. I laid them out, and I did it. Yeah, and it took about 15 minutes. But it's done. And now clipping the shrub is not hanging over me. Now, that's a stupid little thing. But I didn't want to do it. And I had put it off for a couple of days doing other things, justifying to myself, well, I have other stuff I want to do. I'm editing a chapter or I've got to do some book work. No, okay, I didn't have anything to do in that half an hour between getting off the air and going to come here. Bray, you are one articulate dude and stuff. So given that, the point is this. It's the initial inertia, the body at rest, that has to be overcome. And oftentimes it's not a matter of convincing yourself to overcome it. It's a matter of just moving. People will say, how do you go lift? I go, well, I get in the car and I drive here. I don't think about, I'm kind of tired. How am I going to do today? Maybe I'll just skip some stuff. Maybe I'll just make it a short lift. I got stuff I got to do tonight. And if I start doing that, I could find reasons to skip every lift or to short shift every lift. At the end, the inertia is long gone. I'm at motion, and the motion keeps me going as I move from exercise to exercise. But it was that initial getting there. And I think that's what I would say to Vicky, our caller, which is you don't decide that you want to do it. If it is something that you know needs to be done or must be done at some point, it's a matter of day-to-day living, or it's a matter of what is good for you to do. You just move. The worst thing you can do is debate it, to think about how will you get yourself motivated. It's not a matter of motivation. It's a matter of just moving ahead. Because once you get into it, as I said with writing, it's very difficult for me to sit down and start a new chapter when I have nothing to edit. It's easy to edit a chapter. The stuff's already there, so I can massage it and work with it. That's easy enough done. But writing and starting a new chapter, trying to get my thoughts on that paper. Yeah, that's right. I write longhand. Yeah, in cursive, which my typist can't read. I'm giving her training. That's the hardest part. And I'm just now getting close to being done with all editing, and I've got to start a new chapter. And I know I'm going to have to go to that table, sit down, get a cup of coffee. Coffee helps you do think better. It does. It really does. And then start putting down thoughts on paper and see where it goes. And before I know it, I look up and I've been doing it for an hour and I got something on 5 or 6 sheets of paper to mess with. Don't let the law of inertia stop you from doing things you know are good for you. Dr. Ray.
We'll return after these messages.
Do you own popular index mutual funds or ETFs? If so, you're automatically own shares of companies that conflict with your moral beliefs. Ave Maria mutual funds are managed to conform to pro-life and pro-family values. Long-term investors can invest in the no-load Ave Maria mutual funds. The experienced professional portfolio managers make decisions based on investment fundamentals and pro-life values. You can learn more about Ave Maria mutual funds today at 866 Ave Maria or visit AveMariaFunds.com. The Heart of the Interior Life with Elizabeth Jingle.
In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. The interior life is the life of our soul. It is our inner world. It is the very depths of our hearts. Entering within our hearts, which isn't always an easy task, is necessary for the spiritual work of discernment. St. Ignatius of Loyola gives us unparalleled instruction for identifying, understanding, and responding to the various movements of the human heart that we experience on a daily basis. St. Ignatius's 14 Rules for the Discernment of Spirits gives us practical tools that will set our hearts free to respond with greater attentiveness to the Holy Spirit and to reject what is not from Him. The Holy Spirit speaks to our hearts in a personal and loving way. His light is His love. Let us ask for the intercession of St. Ignatius of Loyola to bring new light for our interior lives.
For more information, visit AveMariaRadio.net.
This program brought to you in part by Ave Maria, Florida, a big kind of small town where golf carts take you everywhere and there's always something fun around the corner. Discover championship golf, resort-style amenities, and a town center full of shopping and dining. With Ave Maria University and Ave Maria Catholic Church at its heart, it's a community full of connection and charm. More than 25 model homes are available for viewing. More information can be found at AveMaria.com. That's AveMaria.com.
All right, I better get right to it. I do not have time for badinage or persiflage. On this Look Back Friday, let's go to David, whose 4-year-old son spit on a kid. Do you believe it? Must be a reflection of David. Spit on somebody, huh? Hey, little boys spit, man. They spit all over the place. Did he get in trouble? Get in trouble at preschool?
Yes. So
what'd they do?
They're suggesting all sorts of. I mean, it happened twice. It happened once in September, and it happened once recently with the same other child.
Well, what are they suggesting?
Well, they're suggesting looking at other programs. They're suggesting going to a private like psychology classroom to observe the child. Yeah. Right.
Wait.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, a lot of times when preschool programs do this, it's because there's an ongoing discipline problem, and the spit was just the more gross of the discipline problem. But have they complained about any other behavior other than the 2 spits?
No.
Okay, that's the first thing I would ask him next time you go pick up your son. I'd say, is he cooperative with you?
Yes.
Yes, he's very cooperative. So how are you interpreting? Please help me out. You're not challenging him. You're not trying to pin him into a corner. How are you interpreting this? What do you think it means? David, I got to tell you, I am a bit biased against some of these preschool programs that heavily over-psychologize kids' behaviors. I want to hear what they think. Now, my guess would be that this kid probably is a bit of a provocateur for your son. I imagine. He hasn't spit on anybody else, right?
I don't know that part, but I guess the root of the question is what kind of discipline is appropriate for the 4-year-old? Is it?
Well, I'm getting to that. I'm getting to that. But here's part of the reason I've prefaced all my remarks with this is because certain behaviors look more abnormal, if you will, than others. Say your son would have stuck out his tongue at this kid. I'm not sure they'd be reacting like this. Or say that maybe he would have called him a name. Like my little grandson is approaching 3 years old, and some kid at preschool said something to him, and my grandson said, "Ugga bugga, spray water on you." And that was his vicious response. I suspect that there's something about spitting that sort of hits them the wrong way. That's why I'm saying, well, we got to be careful how we don't overinterpret what he did. That's one.
Mm-hmm.
What I would do if it were me, it isn't necessarily what's appropriate. It would be what's the intensity of your discipline. Now, by that, I mean, some people would say, well, I'm going to sit him on the steps when he gets home for 4 minutes. Okay. But if you're panicky about this happening again, and then your little guy getting booted out of the program, what I would do is something like, okay, I would tell him, son, what you did, you can't do. You can't do that. So the next 5 things you ask for is going to be no. So if he wants his juice cup, that's no. You spit on the kid. If he wants to stay up, you say, no, you're going to have to go to bed early because you spit on the kid. In other words, it isn't so much the spit appropriate discipline that you're looking for. It's more the spit message discipline. In other words, son, yeah, what you did was wrong. Shouldn't have done that. And I'm going to have to make it expensive for you so that we can make it likely that it won't happen again. I would definitely sit down with the teachers and just say, please help me understand how you interpret this and are thinking we should look, 1, for another program or 2, for counseling. That just blows me away. First of all, counseling doesn't work with a 4-year-old. And second of all, what that implies, there's some kind of abnormality to the kid. That just...
Which is not the case.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I could see it if they're using it as an excuse. We've been putting up with this kid all year, and that was the final straw. Okay, I got that. But no, if they're saying he's the delightful little boy and a couple of random episodes with the same kid, by the way, and it's kind of like football. The guy who punches second gets the flag thrown because they didn't catch the first guy. I got to believe they didn't catch this first kid. My son, when he was 3 years old, were visiting my uncle. I guess he was getting bored, so he starts running in circles. In one of those circles, he ran past my uncle and he spit at him. Now, fortunately, it was a dry spit and it missed its target anyway. Now, why'd he do it? I don't know. What do you think I am, a psychologist? I have no idea. It was impulsive. So I dealt with it. Rather significantly. I mean, he just had to sit until he was ready to make it right and say sorry, and which ended up him sitting for probably 20 minutes at least. All right, so given all that, my overall thought on this is we're just so heavily over-psychologized in our society. And we are so quick to look at a kid and go, ooh, boy, something's wrong with you. Look what you did. Only people who have a screw loose up there are going to act like that. The key was he wasn't a behavior problem. The key was these were impulsive little spits. And I would really be curious to find out how they are interpreting them. So I want to know what they think. And then I would tell them, I'm going to deal with this. And if it happens again, he will be disciplined again at home. Can you give me a couple more? Can you give him a couple more chances? I want my discipline time to take effect. Now, that's risky because I have seen preschool people say, well, I don't know if we should make it feel like we're trying to tattle on him. I mean, I've seen that. Talk about overthinking. Oh, my gosh. But Dad's essentially saying, go to spit manual subsection C. What's the appropriate consequence? Now, it's not appropriate. It's the measure of the consequence. In other words, something that tells the son, don't do this, or the consequences are going to be pretty significant. Now, you hope that is a message that the child absorbs. But if it happens again, you discipline it again. And hopefully the preschool people are tolerant enough to say, okay, Dad's dealing with it. Let's see if it declines. Thanks for joining me here on The Doctor Is In. I appreciate the company so very much. Andrew Kruchek for all you do there in Ann Arbor. Producer man, editor man. Walk with God. That is your eternal walk.
For information on Dr. Ray's presentations, books, and CDs, visit drray.com and follow him on Facebook and Instagram. The Doctor Is In is a co-production of Ave Maria Radio and EWTN Radio and carried across the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.